Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have a special edition for you, and this is off of tsln.com. The URL is in the description of the video if you'd like to take a look at it yourself. I'll go ahead and read it to you. It starts out here, locked out. Jeanette Finicum struggles with BLM after shooting death of her husband, Lavoy, by the Oregon State Troopers. Her husband will never return to trail the cows to Winter Range again, but Jeanette Finicum is determined that she will get the job done eventually. Although she's provided a check to fully cover fines assessed over the last year, the Arizona rancher continues to be locked out of both her winter and summer grazing ranges. Jeanette, whose husband Lavoy Finicum was shot and killed by Oregon State Troopers last January, has managed grazing decisions on their northern Arizona ranch alone since his January 26, 2016 death. Pounding staples, doctoring sick calves, and putting out minerals are on Jeanette's list of tasks to complete throughout the year. Those are the easy jobs. She can soon add much more painful item to the list, filing suit against the Bureau of Land Management. She plans to file suit within the next 2 weeks. And she says here in quotes, my husband is dead because he went to help the Hammonds. He stood for them, and now the federal government's trying real hard to make an example out of my husband. This is what will happen if you dare stand up. It's like they're saying, you get in your place and don't get out of it again, or we'll put you in solitary confinement, or we'll kill you. That's what I see happening. Innocent people are in jail right now, unquote. The Finicums manage 2 separate grazing permits, summer and winter. Their 16,000 acres of winter range is to be grazed between October the 15th and May the 15th. During the fall of 2015, Lavoy decided to utilize one pasture of his winter range that hadn't been grazed in 6 years. The grass was really tall, he said. I'm going to let the cows use the grass, although his range allotment agreement allowed him 169 AUMs. Lavoy had never turned out more than 70 head of cows on his winter range. In fact, many years it was less than that. He put his cattle on pasture about 40 days before October the 15th. In order to best utilize the grass, some of the 70 cows remained on the pasture throughout the winter, and others were moved on top of the mountain where the rest of the winter range is located. As ranchers, we take into consideration all these things. We want to use the grass in a way that is best for the grass, Jeanette said. Jeanette explains that the land that she and Lavoy always considered their summer range is actually a small allotment that allows for maintenance of 35 AUMs year-round, but they only use the land in the summer. It wouldn't serve that property well to graze it year-round. We want to be good stewards of the range, she said. I know there are bad apples out there, but most of the ranchers want the land to be well taken care of, to be able to produce and stay healthy. The Finicum's grazing fees have always been paid in full, she explains. Before traveling to Oregon to join protesters in opposition to the arrest of federal land ranchers Stephen and Dwight Hammond, Lavoy had announced his plan to begin to pay his grazing fees to the county rather than the feds. He believed that constitutionally the state and the county should be managing the land. He made the announcement that he was no longer going to sign the contract, but the contracts were still in effect. Because of Lavoy's untimely death, the contract remained intact and grazing fees were paid, Jeanette said. Jeanette said that the BLM fined her trespass fees for the days the cattle were on the winter allotment prior to October the 15th, and fees continued to accrue even after October the 15th turnout date came and went. In an effort to reduce the trespass fees to a more reasonable figure, Jeanette negotiated with the BLM throughout the spring. It came to her attention that she would not be allowed to use her summer range, and she began to look for alternative pasture. Finding none, she felt like she had nowhere to go, and finally decided to dry lot her cows and calves, taking them off winter range in the first week of July. Although Tri-State Livestock News asked Arizona State BLM representatives a number of questions relating to this subject, their response was brief, and they said, quote, the Bureau of Land Management has been in contact with attorneys representing Jeanette Finicum and Lavoy Finicum's estate since May 2016 in an attempt to resolve fines associated with nearly a year-long grazing trespass on the truck-up allotment, said Amber Cargile, Director of Communication for Arizona's BLM department. Jeanette continued negotiations with BLM to not only lessen the trespass fines, but also to complete other paperwork the BLM was calling for, because they were not recognizing her as the allotment owner. Rather than allow Jeanette to take over the grazing allotments after Lavoie's death, state BLM representatives said she was not considered the heir to the allotments, even though she was the widow of one. They told the grazing permits terminated upon his death, and that she would have to start at square one with the application process to graze their cattle on the allotment. Jeanette said the BLM also told her that the grazing rights are not inheritable, but she and her attorney disagree, that it is property and an asset to our estate, she said. The BLM said an environmental impact study would have to be conducted to determine whether or not she was eligible to graze the allotments. Jeanette's attorney advised her that under BLM Rule 43 CFR 4110.2-3, the BLM is required to provide her 2 years to meet any paperwork requirements and must allow her to continue to graze her cattle during those 2 years. Jeanette said she and her attorneys brought this law to the attention of the BLM representatives and were told, "We don't do it that way." The BLM recognizes that Mrs. Finicum is a personal representative of her late husband's estate. The BLM has been working with Mrs. Finicum and her legal counsel on issues related to both the fees associated with her husband's estate as well as the future of the permit. Due to ongoing nature of these discussions, we're not at liberty to provide additional details at this time, said BLM Cargyle. Jeanette dry-lotted the cows and calves throughout the summer to avoid selling the entire herd. She worked to meet BLM requirements, planning to turn her cattle out on the winter range at the proper time without incident. Fines of over $12,000 had mounted up over the trespass. When the negotiations continued to dead end, Jeanette decided to pay those fines in full. With the 50-mile trail to her winter range, Mrs. Finicum had begun moving cattle on October the 13th, planning to make about 15 miles a day until she arrived. Her mother-in-law had agreed to deliver a check for $12,355.47, the amount of the trespass fines and her application required for the BLM's environmental impact study. "I was told we had to deal with the BLM," she remembers. About one full day into the trail, a messenger arrived telling her that the BLM would not take her check and that she would not be allowed to turn her cattle onto BLM winter range allotment. "They said they weren't accepting my check. I'm 14 miles into the middle of the desert with cows and calves and nowhere to go," she recalls. "I had to find another range. My attorney and I at that point were still trying to negotiate. We thought it would be less than 30 days and I'd be back on my range. Finally, my attorney said, 'Jeanette, this is ridiculous. They don't even follow their own laws. You need to do something. You need to move forward.' So she decided to file suit." Jeanette said her sister-in-law stepped in and offered pasture her cattle for now. While she and her late husband always maintained a cordial working relationship with their local BLM office, the state office has now been in communication with her regarding all of these issues, Jeanette said. "My husband and I liked the local range conservationists. We always got along with them, but their hands are tied." She said that the state BLM office only communicates vaguely, such as offering to negotiate but not following through. "They say they want to work with you, but then they do nothing. They don't want my cows back out there." She's a little angry at the whole situation. "My husband is dead because he went out to help the Hammonds. He stood for them, and now the federal government are trying real hard to make an example out of my husband. This is what will happen if you dare stand up. It's like saying, 'You get in your place, don't get out of it again, or we'll put you in solitary confinement or we'll kill you.' That's what I see happening. Innocent people are in jail right now," she said, referencing Stephen and Dwight Hammond and 5 members of the Bundy family. Lavoie was shot to death during last January's protest headquartered on the Malheur Wildlife Refuge near Burns, Oregon, while traveling with a caravan of peaceful protesters to a community meeting about federal land issues in nearby John Day. Oregon state and federal officers arrested all members of the party except Lavoie, who they killed after he exited his vehicle at a police stop point. Well, they call it a stop point. I'm going to call it a kill point. The Oregon State Police later claimed that Lavoie was reaching for a weapon after they shot him in the back. The Oregon State Police were cleared of any wrongdoing in March when the local investigators determined that the state trooper's fatal shots were justified, but 2 shots from an FBI agent remains under investigation. Initially, FBI agents denied taking the shots toward LeBoy as he exited the vehicle with his hands in the air, but it was later proven that the shells were deployed from FBI weapons. Jeanette said she has filed an intent to sue for wrongful death over LeBoy's murder. And there you have this special edition. If you like what we're doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it around so everybody gets to hear the news. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Click the little bell beside that subscribe button and check that box, and you'll get email messages every time I put up a show.